Welcome back, everybody. It is the next episode of the Fearless Business Podcast. I'm your host, Robin Waite, the Fearless Business Coach. We're going to be talking all things content and digital marketing today, and I have a very esteemed guest. The New York Times calls him the web marketing guru, but what I call him is the author of one of the finest books, I think, out there, marketing-wise. It's Marcus Sheridan. Welcome to the show, Marcus.
Robin, it's going to be a great day, man. Excited to have a chat.
Absolutely. And the book, in my excitement there, I forgot to mention it, is They Ask You Answer. Obviously, we're going to be hearing all about that during today's episode. But I want to dive straight in because in the time that both you and I, Marcus, have been in business, which is, a couple of decades, we're close to 50 years, I bet, between the two of us. There's a lot which has changed, hasn't there, in internet marketing? So I want to dive straight in. And I know this is a very broad, sort of open-ended question. Hopefully, you'll be able to dissect it for us. But what's new? What's happening in content marketing and digital marketing at the moment that all of our listeners should know about?
I think one of the biggest trends right now that everybody should be paying attention to, they're not, is what would be the seller free and self-service trend. And what I mean by that is this: there's a few stats that have come out recently. Gartner did a study, says that 33% of buyers would prefer to have a seller free sales experience. You should chew on that one for a second. So in other words, 33% of buyers say that if I had a choice, I'd rather just do this whole thing by myself instead of being forced to talk to a salesperson. And for millennials, that's 44%, that number. Wow. And of course, it's only gone up. So the question is, what are we doing as marketers, be it content marketers, digital marketers, et cetera, with our business so as to replicate our sales process, what we traditionally have done in a face-to-face or a, quote, person-to-person method? What are we doing to allow more of that to happen on our website? And let me give you a really, really quick example. Okay, Robin, is that okay with you?
I'll go for it.
Sometimes it's hard for people to understand. And so any question that traditionally they would have to ask a, quote, salesperson to get an answer to, could you address that on your site? So for example, I'm a pool guy, right? That's where I started. That's part of my story. We'll probably mention that later. But one of the questions that people will come to me and ask is, okay, so what is the best type of pool for me? Should I get an in-ground fiberglass pool, concrete pool, or vinyl liner pool? Now, my company only sells fiberglass, but these are three main choices that people have. So this is something that we used to talk about in the home when they invited us to their house. We talked about the pros of fiberglass, how it compared to the other ones. But today, if you go on the website, what you could find is a tool that honestly and transparently allows you to essentially receive an assessment as to which type of pool best fits your needs. And here's what's great about it, Robin. It's not biased. So in other words, there's a series of questions that are asked, same questions I would have asked you back in the day when I was just a pool guy talking to you in your home, series of questions that you would answer. And based on your input, we output an answer, a recommendation. In this case, from what you've said, it appears that a concrete pool would be your best option. It appears that a fiberglass pool would be your best option. That's an example of replicating the sales process without them being forced to talk to a human. And this is popping up more and more. And this trend is something that everyone should be paying attention to right now, Robin, but they're not.
Absolutely. And one of the first things which springs to mind is that you have to, in order to be able to almost put an artificial intelligence, like, an AI type platform in place to be able to ask those questions and draw the answers out of people, you've got to really understand who you're talking to, who your audience is. So I think this is something which a lot of people really struggle with, is niching down and actually really deeply understanding what their audience needs. Where would be a good place to start in that respect?
Well, what's interesting to me about this is I think sometimes this subject of getting to know your audience is actually, we make it much too complicated than what it is. The reason why I say that is because if you actually talk with your customers and obsessively listen to what they're saying, it gets pretty easy to know your audience. Their questions, their worries, their fears, their issues, etc. That's the key. That's where all the magic is. I mean, if you want to stand out from your competitors, that's where it starts. Sometimes marketers come to me and say, I just don't know the questions my audience is asking. And I'm like, when was the last time you spent a full day with anybody that's in sales? Because if you spend a day selling, you should know your audience. And so that's where it starts. The other place is this, though. Robin, you and I have evolved our behavior online. In other words, each one of us is shifting more and more as time goes in terms of what we expect online, what we want to experience when we go to a website, what we want to read, how we want to feel, the type of information we want to see, how it should be presented to us. We know these things inherently because we're human. And so if we just hyperanalyze what we ourselves desire when we're on a website, when we're going through the buying process, it's really pretty easy to say, hey, guess what? My customers would want that too, because your customers are just like you, because they're also human and they have those same human psychological needs that you have.
100%. And why? I mean, I think I know the answer to this. Why do you think people don't go into that depth of detail?
I don't know. It's we truly over his classic case. All right. We have these things called B2B and B2C, right? Before I got into the world of marketing and started, speaking on stages and all this stuff, I didn't know what the acronym B2B. I owned a pool company, had lots of employees for 10 years. I had never heard the phrase B2B in my life. Why do we say these things? Well, B2B selling process is unique. It is way more decision makers, and it's all these. It's like, okay, I own an agency today, and it's got a lot of employees, and I sell to a lot of clients. It's a straight B2B service-based business. At its core, it ain't no different than selling swimming pools. We overcomplicate stuff. Marketers are the worst at this. This is why, still to this day, Robin, the number one email I get from readers and listeners to my stuff isn't from business owners saying, hey, I need more traffic, leads, and sales. That's the second most common email I get. The first most common email I get is from marketers who are frustrated because they catch the vision, but the rest of their team doesn't. And they're like, if I can't make headway, I'm going to leave this organization. I'm going to leave this company because they're just not getting it. One of the reasons why this happens too often is because marketers speak like marketers. If you want to win over the rest of the organization, you have to learn to speak leadership and sales. That's who you need to speak like. The reason why They Ask You Answer the book was so successful and continues to be incredibly successful is because I didn't write it for marketers, even though marketers love it. I wrote it for the hard-headed CEO that doesn't want to buy in, or for that sales manager that's not reading between the lines and seeing, oh my goodness, this is how the world of sales and how my buyer has changed today. And because I wrote it that way and didn't try to sound smart and was only looking to have communion with my audience, that's what made it successful.
It's really funny, actually, what you talk about with the emails there, because like one of my biggest frustrations is when I put myself out there as a business coach is that inbound marketing where it's like, hey, I can generate you 5 to 10 leads a week. And it's like, I've got a big target on my back. And it's like, people don't want to know about, I had a massive rant in this Facebook group where we're going live in at the moment about click funnels and all this automated whizzy shiny stuff that seems to be absolutely surrounding every business startup at the moment. And we can't really get away from it. Like, you're never just one funnel away. If it was that simple, all of these businesses would have like so much success. We'd all be multimillionaires. And I think it's very misleading for a lot of business owners. So it's not just the language, but it's also the people who, the leadership, the people who are actually putting that message out there. And I think one of the things which I took from your talk a couple of years ago, and also from reading the book, was actually just the principle of, like, going back to first principles of marketing, of keeping it simple and speaking your customer's language.
Well, to that, best example in the book, and this is one thing that those that have read They Ask You Answer, they love this section, which is called the Big Five. Big Five are the 5 subjects that every buyer, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, service, product, big, small, local, national, they want to know, they want to understand while they're engaging or while they're starting the buying process, before they engage a company, they want to understand 5 subjects. Here's the 5 subjects. Buyers want to understand cost, price, rates, etc. Okay, that's number 1, cost, price. Number 2, they want to understand what are the negatives, what are the problems with that particular product, service. How could this blow up in my face? So number 2 is problems. Number 3, as buyers, we love to compare. We want to compare what we're looking at versus the other options that we have. Okay. Number 4, we love reviews. Okay. Reviews. We love to see reviews about product, services, etc. Number 5, best. Think about how many times you've gone online and searched for best such and such. So cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, best. Those are the big 5. Now, here's what's crazy about these things, Robin. As buyers, we have all gone to Google a billion times and researched those 5 subjects. Yet, notwithstanding, for the most part, as businesses, we don't like to talk about those things. 90% of service-based businesses still don't talk about cost and price on their website, which is nuts, considering every single person wants to understand cost and price better, what defines value, et cetera, before they engage a company, yet most still don't do it. Most won't compare their product, their service, honestly and transparently versus the competition, whereas everybody still wants to know, and they're going to do that on their own. You may as well do that for them in an honest and transparent way. These 5 things drive the economy, yet businesses still like the ostrich with its head in the sand, ignore them, and that's holding us back from attaining the amount of trust that we could be attaining from our audience.